to the chairperson for the Commission for People with Disabilities for the Diocese of Salt Lake City, who's Carol Rudell, and she's brought also with her a member of that committee, Jeff Allen.
Good morning, and I really have to thank Deacon Bob and Ruth for inviting us. It's really been an honor. This will be the second time we've met with Deacon, so it's just such an honor to be here today. But I really quickly want you to tell me what parish you're at, if you don't mind. I know where you are, but that's okay.
I know where I am.
Yes, I do.
St. Mary's, Park City.
St. Francis Xavier in Kern.
Okay, great.
St. Florence Mission up in Huntsville.
Okay, good.
You're next.
Blessed Sacrament.
Blessed Sacrament, and you must go ahead. That's good.
Yeah, here he is.
You're his.
Same thing.
Okay, great.
Sacred Heart Parish.
Great.
St. John the Baptist in Rayford.
I knew I recognized you. So that's good.
St. Mary of the Assumption.
Park City. Mark?
St. Thomas More. St. Joseph, Monticello.
Monticello. Thank you for coming.
Sure.
We're going to be down there, just so you know.
Are you?
We're coming to you. Yes.
St. John the Baptist.
St. Andrew.
Great. Thank you all so much, truly, for having us with you today. We have a lot to cover, and I know some of you did not receive a letter from the bishop. So who did not receive a letter from the bishop with guidelines included? Oh my goodness.
I just grabbed one from there.
Okay, but you might want to know what the bishop said. So how about if I give you a copy of the letters? Okay. Anyone
I
else?
just got the document, not the letter.
Oh, goodness.
Well, if I did, I didn't. I have the document. Thank you.
And unfortunately, my version of the letter did not include the Spanish. It's on the back, so mine's only in English. I apologize. But anyway, and then who did not bring one today? Would you like one to have today? Yes, you'll need that too.
I think Bob sent out a PDF format also.
Okay, and I have a
which you can
PDF.
share with other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you need one too?
Yeah.
Did you go? Cool. Okay. The only reason, just so you know, the commission, we're really small. Our budget is $5,700 a year, and we just spent $4,000 buying these.
Wow.
Yeah, they're $5 a piece. I have them in Spanish, but of course, USTCB is obligated to. They make a commitment to English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So which one did they publish? English. But I have them in Spanish as a PDF. So if anybody wants those, just let me
Give you
know.
a better rate for more.
No, don't I wish? Yeah. No, but it is nice. And to be honest with you, I'll be frank. The reason we bought them is because you will probably throw this one away. And if I give you one that's paper, it might find its way to the round pile. Let's just say that. So, oh, come on, let's be honest. I mean, right? Is this not true? Okay. Hey, Jeff, would you mind sharing those around? So I'll just give you a copy of the PowerPoint. You can take notes on it today.
This is Daniel from Windows.
Oh, thank you for coming. Yeah. So I have to back up and explain why we're going to be in Monticello.
Okay.
So the Commission for People with Disabilities, a long time ago, my gosh, it's been ages now, we started doing what we call a Catholics Can Mass. And it's just a mass that we do to celebrate people with disabilities and their gifts. It's been at St. Mary's in Park City, it's been at St. John the Baptist, it's been at St. Marguerite's in Tooele. It's been around. We've been at Holy Family, but we will be in Monticello.
Wow.
We're coming to you. We do a balance between doing it on like a Saturday afternoon, which is what we've done both at St. Mary's, versus a Sunday Mass. It's kind of like, can we celebrate with the whole community, right? Versus maybe an opportunity for people to come in a Mass where they can be loud and all those other things too. So we're coming to September 9th, I think. I will double check the date, but we're coming to Monticello. We're excited for that. So.
Yeah, great.
You bring the bishop with you then.
And, oh yeah, we actually absolutely bring the bishop with us. He'll be down there. He's actually coming for the weekend, I think, down there.
Probably golfing.
Well, he may be golfing, yes.
It's a nice course down there.
It's a nice course. Okay, so thank you again. As you all know, we are doing this workshop as an open workshop as well. And sometimes I have to explain who the USCCB is. I don't think I have to do that here. But these folks, these gentlemen who provide leadership in our church here in the United States, have a lot of things happening. And when they initially put out the guidelines for celebration of sacraments back in 1995, it kind of was just a one-time thing, you know, and they thought, oh, we're just going to take care of this issue. We want to be sure everybody's included, we want to be doing things. And so they issued a document, this is why these are the revised guidelines, if you will. And this time around, it took 6 years to do the revision. I'm a past member of the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, and we assisted in the writing of them. And I went back and looked at my notes, and my first meeting about the revision was 6 years ago. So it takes time. It actually went through 3 different offices at the USCB, as well as 2 of their different general meetings, so they meet twice a year. And these were approved, it'll be 1 year in June that they approved them. So they've been out for a while. These didn't get like printed till more recently, and obviously we don't have the Spanish ones yet, but they do a lot of work, as you know, around the church. And one of the reasons people say, well, why are the bishops even bothering to deal with this? And I think it's because they know in their own diocese that oftentimes people with disabilities aren't included, or they're forgotten, or people have come to them and said, my child's being denied First Communion. Yeah. So the bishops themselves want to affirm the dignity of all people in all walks of life. And we know our church believes that it's from conception to natural death. So therefore, what are we doing for that? Instead of the 2 ends, what are we doing for that in between? And that's what they want to do, is affirm that. They also are aware of the variances in their own parishes and their own dioceses about how people with disabilities have been included. And they want to make sure that that variance is to the benefit of everyone rather than to the detriment. They are aware of not only physical barriers, Lord knows we have old churches that sometimes, you just got a new church. So we have this beautiful accessible church, right? But it's not just about our buildings, it's about our programs. It's about our CIA, it's about sacramental preparation, it's about all of that. So it's not just about our buildings being accessible, it's about everything we do in parish life being inclusive and being accessible. And they recognize that sometimes people still make choices, whether it's in the leadership of our church or in the pew or the person next to me on Sunday, that maybe I'm still making choices because I'm a little nervous. I'm not sure how to deal with this person who's with mental illness next to me in the pews talking to themselves through all of Mass, okay? I'm not sure what to do with this person who's in a wheelchair when I don't have any cuts. Where are they going to sit in church? And I don't know what to do with this young man with autism because now his parents wanting to make First Communion, okay? So the reality is there's a lot of, we're human. We are human. And we bring our experiences and our fears and our uncomfortableness with us. And what the bishops are saying is, yeah, we do. But now what can we do about that? And that's what the revised guidelines are about. So this, as I said, this is not their first. They made a statement, a pastoral statement in 1978. The first guidelines were in 1995. And now we have revised guidelines. So this is not the first time the bishops have talked about this. 1978 also happened at a time we had a couple federal laws change around access, including IDEA, which is our most one we're usually familiar with, which is the schools. And they said, wait a minute, if schools are supposed to be accessible, shouldn't churches be too? And so they came out with their first pastoral statement about the same time. The guidance that they provide is just that. There's no way we can write a document for every single circumstance, for every person in every parish. But they do want to give guidance, and they want that guidance to be that strong foundation upon which we build everything else. They also, one of the things you'll notice in the guidelines is there are a ton of references. This is not a document that is written in isolation from any other church teaching. You will see references in there to almost, I don't want to say every document in the church, but there's references to reconciliation, there's references to each of the sacraments, there's references to different doctrines around catechesis, and I mean there's just, this is not written in isolation. It was intended to be something that pulled all of that together. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple caveats, and I just said one of them. The guidelines do not address everything. They can't. Obviously, we're individuals, we're part of a body of Christ. We can give guidance to the body of Christ, but we still need to deal with things on an individual level. So that's the first one. And the second one is they present a set of guidance that looks at just providing access to the sacraments. So we think of the sacramental life of the church, I think of the sacramental life of the church as being the epitome, the maximum, if you will, the top, the apex of my faith. Okay? And if I can have some guidance on how to help someone else make that sacrament be just as important and just as valuable and just as integrated into their life, that's what the bishops are talking about. I'm not going to read the quotes. There are several quotes on your handout. How's that? I want to start with the general principles, though. Okay? And the general principles provide that foundation, as I said. The very first one, all human beings are equal in dignity in the sight of God, and moreover, by reason of their baptism, all Catholics share in the same divine calling. So someone who's elderly, who's been a Eucharistic minister for 40 years, well maybe not 40, 35 years, how do we help them continue to be a ministry? How do we help them continue to grow and be a part of the body of Christ in a way that they always have been? Just because they're aging, do we find a different way to do it now? Right? How do we help someone fully participate as body of Christ and respond to that baptismal calling? That's what they're saying. Every single person, by reason of baptism, is called not only to be ministered to in our faith, but to minister to others, regardless of ability or disability. Number 2, Catholics with disabilities have the right to participate in the sacraments as fully as other members of the ecclesial community. Sacred ministers cannot deny the sacraments to those who seek them at appropriate time, are properly disposed, and who are not prohibited from law from receiving them. That's not new, right? That is not new in our faith. But I think the challenge comes in is how do we make that happen? If we go back to us being a little bit uncomfortable about how I'm going to help this young man with autism figure out how to First Communion, but I still need to do something about it. I need to be active about it. I need to make sure that I'm doing something so that that person can respond to that same baptismal call that I respond to as a catechist. Right? General principle number 3. This is the kind of, I'm kind of reading them because I know we have people that may not be able to see what's up here or have difficulty seeing, but we also might have people that want to hear it. We all learn differently, right? Parish sacramental celebrations should be accessible to persons with disabilities and open to their full, active, and conscious participation according to their capacity. Pastoral ministers should not presume to know the needs of persons with disabilities, but rather, and before all else, consult with them or their advocates before making determination about accessibility of the facilities and the availability of its programs, policies, and ministries. Full accessibility should be the goal of every parish. It's very easy. I do this, and I should stop myself from doing it too. I just think my own parish. I go to St. Thomas More. I am frequently at St. Vincent de Paul because I interpret for the deaf. I occasionally am up at St. Mary's in Park City interpreting for the deaf. So I'm around and I see a lot of different things. And I see someone come in with a wheelchair, and I see somebody look for a pew cut, finding a place for that wheelchair to sit. Well, okay, before you were deacons, and think about your family. Do you have your own seat in the church? Okay, come on, admit it. I can tell you, I grew up on the left side front, 3rd row. Right? Okay, I want to sit with my family. Should the person in the wheelchair be able to sit with their family? We all do it, right? And if you get into church and somebody's in your pew, it's like, okay, I guess I'll sit over here today. I mean, obviously we're not going to give them mean looks or something. But, we think about it. We want people to be able to sit where they want to sit. So does it have to be a pew cut? Does it have to be a spot where I can put a wheelchair? Can it be somewhere else? We, when Bishop Wester was here, we did our Catholics Chem Mass at the cathedral. It was his idea. And I looked dead at him and said, it's the most inaccessible parish building in the diocese, don't you? It's before we had the door button from the courtyard. He said, yeah, but we can make it work. We'll have ushers there to help people. And I said, okay, and you know that we're not going to be able to fill the aisle. You know, where are we going to put his wheelchairs? He said, we'll just put him in the aisle. And I said, you have ushers that are going to shoo him out of the aisle. Well, why would they do that? Because you're coming?
Procession, right?
Yeah, the procession, right? He said, no, I'll tell him not to worry about it. And we have a picture of that aisle, literally. When he came down the aisle, cross-bearer service, he was like this. He didn't mind it at all, you know, because it was about people being in church and being a part. So when we think about how we look at our parishes, it's not just about that physical accessibility. It is about all the ministries. How many people have, I won't ask for show of hands, but you know, how many people have a blind lector in your parish, or someone with autism as a Eucharistic minister, or someone in a wheelchair as hospitality? You know, 20% of the population, literally, 1 in 5 people, when you look out every Sunday, have a disability. That's 1 in 5. Now, a lot of disabilities aren't visible. We can see a wheelchair. We can't necessarily see somebody who's living with depression or bipolar disorder. We might not see someone who's got hair long enough to cover up their hearing aids. You know, it's 1 in 5. That's a lot of people in a parish when you think about it. So, okay, number 4. Since the parish is the center of the Christian experience for most Catholics, pastors and other parish ministers should make every effort to provide for all Catholics with disabilities who reside in the parish boundaries. Now, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and I can tell you on my street who was and wasn't Catholic. Okay? In Utah, most of our LDS friends can do the very same thing. But who isn't in the pews? Do we think about we think about who's there, but do we think about who's not there? And this is what our bishops are saying to us, is, are people not there because maybe they haven't felt as welcomed or included because of their disability? And I'll be the first to say, there was a young mother with 3 children who sat in my row on a regular basis. And her littlest one was just Nancy. And her 3-year-old, of course, was just kind of all over the pew. And instead of, she got a lot of stares. I won't kid you. And I even watched one person point to the cry room. Okay. And I went to the mom, who was a little further away from me, and just said, you know, I have my rosary and I have a little prayer book with me. Could I sit with your 3-year-old? And she said, oh, would you? And so the 3-year-old and I sat through Mass, and I quietly pointed out what was happening up at the altar and how that was Jesus, you know. And he had my full attention, and we were quiet, and we didn't disturb people around us. But that's what we should be doing, is welcoming, not pointing to the cry room and giving the ugly look, you know. So when we think about, and that mom is quick coming. I don't know why, I don't know if she's moved, but that kind of makes me want to pray for that mom and that family, because they're not here anymore. And why? So the bishops are challenging us to not only think about who's in the parish and showing up, but who's missing. Number 5, pastors are responsible to provide evangelization, catechetical formation, and sacramental preparation for parishioners with disabilities. Dioceses are encouraged to establish appropriate support services to assist pastors in this duty. Parish catechetical and sacramental preparation programs may need to be adapted for some parishioners with disabilities, though as much as possible, persons with disabilities should be integrated into ordinary programs. They should not be segregated for specialized catechesis unless their disability makes it impossible for them to participate in the basic catechetical program. I'm going to give you an example of an email I received yesterday. I have been working with a mother whose son is 11, whose younger siblings are making their first communion next month. The 11-year-old can be loud at church. He has autism. But when he goes up for blessing at communion, he's very reverent. She's telling me this, so it's her word. Very reverent. He gets the blessing, but he's always like looking at that that thing that's got those round red things in them. You know, he's always looking at the ciborium. And she believes that with some preparation, he could make First Communion, right? She's trying to work with the DRE, and the last email, and I'm trying to encourage Mother, and because the commission does not like to butt into this, okay? Our job is not to go up to a DRE and say, really? Come on. It's not our job, okay? So I'm trying to work with Mom and give her some suggestions of language she could use or ideas. And the last email she received was, well, I've found some materials that you can use with your child. And bishops are saying, why isn't the kid in the regular program? What's different? What makes it unique? You can modify things, and I'll be the first to say, I'm an old teacher, guys. I know that our catechists are not old teachers like me, so maybe they need some help. And that's what the commission can help with, is if there are things that you need some materials, you need some ideas, you need some strategies of how to do that, we can do that. But I have a feeling that that's going to be a situation where the mom is going to say, would you call Carol? And it's like, I don't like to get in the middle of this, you know. But if the DRE just needs some ideas and some assurance that this will be okay, then I'm happy to do that. So yeah, let's integrate folks into the full life of the church. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, is it okay to ask questions? Or
Absolutely, feel free.
So how does one approach, I'm reading loud and clear all about that. How does one approach, for example, the sacrament of confirmation when the argument may be used relative to reason?
They address that. Can we get to that?
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
I agree. Well, if we go back to that one principle, seeking it at appropriate times are properly disposed and not prohibited by law. Properly disposed includes the catechesis that goes along with it and the reason. So let's talk about that, okay? Okay. Number 6, persons with disabilities, like all other parishioners, should be encouraged to participate in all levels of pastoral ministry. And to abbreviate that, it's a matter of, at St. Thomas More, for example, we have someone who's blind, who was a lector for a long time. And then she felt the call to be a Eucharistic minister. Yeah. And she actually came to she's a member of the commission, she couldn't be here today. She said, and we're good friends, I've known Cindy for quite some time. She said, what do you think? And I said, I think you should talk to Father John. Father John Evans is our pastor. I think you should talk to Father John. Tell him that this is what you feel the Spirit is leading you to do. Now, Father John, of course, he was actually at our open workshop last week and explained his perspective, which was great. He said, I wasn't anxious or nervous so much as I just wanted to make sure she didn't fall off the 3 steps. It was really about safety for him. And guess what? She's a Eucharistic minister. Not only is she a Eucharistic minister, we were a little short on Ash Wednesday. Oh, wow. And there might have been some crosses over here, and there might have been one up here, and there might have been one right there. And she was covered in ashes by the end of Mass, don't get me wrong. But she did it. You know? It really is just a matter of figuring it out.
You explain how they do communion with her.
And communion, she has an altar server who helps her know when someone's coming up to her with the cup. I was telling Jeff, I said, I should tell Cindy this, but she probably knows. She's done the ciborium as well. And if you think about how you give communion, you know, body of Christ, and you hold it up, all the person has to do is receiving is just kind of touch the fingers to the bottom of her hand, and then she would put it in, you know. So it really is just a matter of...
On the tongue might be interesting.
Tongue might be interesting. And you know what? Yeah, that might be interesting. But nevertheless, I think it's a matter of have a conversation and recognize that if Cindy's being led by the Spirit, shouldn't we also be responsive to the Spirit that helps her figure out how to do that ministry? Yeah, it's both of us. Our parishioners we all know the bulletin announcement that says it basically interprets as, we are desperate for ministers. Would you all please sign up? Okay, we all know that. We all know that bulletin announcement. Okay, but if someone truly is feeling responsive, then we should be responsive to. Yeah, Mark.
Just a comment on the
St. Thomas More.
Yeah, the blind woman who lectures. She works her way to the altar with the help of someone to navigate the steps with her dog. And we're supposed to, it's best for us to really hear the scriptures you can hear a pin drop in that place when she's lecturing.
She proclaims.
And she does proclaim.
She
really
proclaims,
does.
she does not read.
So it's not just a matter of her being included in what's going on, but her presence and her participation is making it that much better for the people who are at Mass.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I have people say to me, so that blind lady, I'm like, have you talked with her? Tell Cindy you like how she lectures, you know? And trying to encourage the community, because Cindy doesn't see the people around her talking or whatever. And so I'm like, tell Cindy you like how she lectures. You know, that's good for her to know that her ministry is touching other people as well. So, yeah, Cindy's fun. She challenges us, which is good, but she's also very prayerful and is looking for that spirit to lead her as well. So. Okay,
I just want to say, just going back to that one where it says, and for which they are qualified. I assume it's the same discernment for everybody.
Everybody.
That's, you know, hey, if you don't have a voice, you shouldn't be the cantor. You're, you know, that kind of a thing. So,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So, so as long as we're not
creating
the
something.
same
Yes.
level.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
It really is about the same level. So this young lady is at a parish, I believe, in Pennsylvania, and she has Down syndrome, and she's an altar server, and she got it in her spirit that she wanted to serve a Mass in all 50 states. That's probably better than saying all 186 dioceses, archdioceses, but anyway, and she's done it. Her bishop worked with bishops in all other 49 states, and she's done it. That's what she wanted to do. Some of you all may know Debbie Adams. She's recently passed away, but Debbie's in a wheelchair, and St. Vincent de Paul's 3 steps up to the altar. You know, but she's a Eucharistic minister, and she would just pull her chair up, because that's her independence, right? She'd just pull her chair up to the bottom step, and then someone would just bring her the cup, and then she proceeded to be a Eucharistic minister. So, yeah.
Carol?
Yeah, Jeff?
I might just point out, you mentioned we don't always know who has a disability. That's my daughter.
Yes, this is Maddie. And Maddie's deaf, receiving communion, so. Yeah. So I will admit that was sort of a posed picture. Finding pictures that are local, you have to plan them, because usually those of us who are thinking to take the picture probably are in it, you know. Anyway, I'm always interpreting, so it always takes me out. Anyway, okay, number 7. The creation of a fully accessible parish reaches beyond the physical and encompasses the attitudes of the parishioners toward persons with disabilities. All members of the faith community have a role to play in invitation, welcome, and inclusion. I want to tell you this story. This is Our Lady of Guadalupe Cathedral in Dodge City, Kansas. One of our second most recently built cathedral in the United States, behind Knoxville now, has just did theirs. When they built this parish, and my first year of teaching was in Western Kansas, so I actually know this parish. When they made it a diocese and they wanted to build, they said, the committee, I actually knew someone who was on it, said, we got to do something about accessibility. And so literally, even though you see stairs, they never use it. Mm-hmm. To this day, everyone enters that sanctuary via this ramp. 100%. And what they said was, we want to model that because the physical model of it also goes to attitude. If every day, every Mass, people see accessibility being used, does that not help us understand that our attitude is about accessibility as well? And that's what my friends tell me. I actually lived in Garden City, which is about 50 miles west, but I had friends in Dodge still, and they said the whole parish is very open. They had all kinds of catechetical programs, and they attribute it to this physical reminder to everyone as well. The other thing I would say is sometimes we have 2-story buildings, or sometimes this room is a step up. We know we're built on hills and stuff. This is an example of a parish saying, you know, we don't normally do things in this space, but because we know someone's with a wheelchair, we're going to move whatever we're doing to this space. So it's about saying, oh yeah, that one's 2 steps down. You know, so we're going to move what we're doing to a space that is accessible to everyone. Again, it's letting the physical remind us of our attitude and our understanding as well. Last one. Difficult situations may be encountered by those making pastoral decisions. Dioceses are encouraged to establish appropriate policies for handling such instances which respect the rights of all involved and which ensure the necessary provision of evaluation and recourse. In our diocese, we don't necessarily have a policy or a procedure in place, but what happens is the commission just gets phone calls. And then we have members of our commission who are nurses, we have a mental health counselor, we have folks who are deaf, we have folks who are blind, we have folks that are from a variety of background, old teachers like me, and we just really strive to help parishes. That's what we do, and doing it on a one-on-one basis. So our diocese doesn't necessarily have a policy as such, and that may come if Bishop Oscar decides he's going to implement guidance general principle number 8, we may get that. But in the meantime, that's something we've just been doing for years. So that's what we do.
Kurt, can you get some examples of some of the questions that come to you from parishes or situations?
I would say Tom asked about what kind of questions we typically get. I would say the biggest question is sacramental preparation for children with autism. Hands down. Hands down. And that's tough. I'm not going to kid you. You know, it says those making pastoral decisions. So that's the DRE, that would be the catechist, that's the mom, it's the pastor, it's the deacon. It's a lot of people making those decisions or being a part of that. So I think it's a matter of how do we talk about it? How do we address that? And we're going to give you some really good examples too. So yes, sir.
Now, there's different degrees of autism too.
Oh, sure.
I think you'll find in different attitudes in the people that have the autism.
Mm-hmm. It's really funny because a lot of people, I'm old enough to remember the movie Rain Man. I think oftentimes we think, well, that's what autism looks like. That's probably not what autism looks like in general, you know. So I think we all bring that with us. And recognizing that, oh, maybe it goes back to that other principle that said, like, talk to the people, have the conversation, and figuring out whether it's someone who's really high functioning or just nonverbal, or whether it's someone who does a lot of stimulation, self-stimulation. It's really figuring it out. But we're never going to figure it out if we don't talk about it.
Carol?
Yeah,
I
Jeff?
just want to make a comment adding to what Doug said. It's not just autism, it's any disability. You can't put everybody into a box. Someone can be hard of hearing, someone can be completely deaf, and how we help them with the sacraments is different.
Right. It really does come down to figuring it out, having the conversation, and then doing what's right for that individual. So let's move into some examples, and of course you get sacraments have an order, which you'll notice the order in here is a little different from what we normally think, which I think is great. But let's start with where they start, which is baptism. Pastors should visit with the family. Obviously, we have catechetical formation for families of infants, right? Our children making baptism. One of the things that they really point out is that Catholics with disabilities can be sponsors and godparents. Just like, because that's a part of our baptismal call, right? So to remember that they should be carefully chosen and they should be formed, just as any other godparent or sponsor would be chosen and formed. So it's no different. It might look a little different, might have different ways to do it, but nevertheless. They also specifically address, if there's one thing I see different in the revised guidelines from the previous ones, it's technology, okay? Children are living who would have died before. That's one issue. In the case of parents who are pregnant and receive a prenatal diagnosis that their child will die at birth or die shortly thereafter, the bishops are very specific that we should, if they have a life-threatening condition, we should support them and assure them that their child will be baptized without delay. And then we should be offering emotional and spiritual support and ongoing support. So I think of I have a friend who, her child had a trisomy 18 diagnosis in utero, and really it was quite severe. Did not expect the child to survive, and survived much after birth. And worked with her pastor. When she went into labor, the pastor was present. They had a friend taking pictures after the baby was cleaned up, so they had nice photos of memory. It was just a beautiful experience. And then she quit coming to church. You know, she struggled with why did God let this happen? As I think most parents would, right? And she went back, I finally said to her, why don't you go back to your pastor? Why aren't you having this? He was there for you throughout, right? He's there for you now. And now she's going back to church, but she really felt she had to deal with that good old Dr. Kubler-Ross on Death and Dying. She had to deal with the stages of grief. And, but I think our bishops are saying is, don't forget that parents sometimes deal with things that are unusual. It's not every child that's going to be in this situation, but we better be there as a part of that. There's actually a ministry in North Carolina called Be Not Afraid. It's non-denominational, and this is exactly what they do. They have photographers arranged, they have a pastor or a minister arranged. That is all they do is prior to birth, at birth, and after birth, having that support spiritually and emotionally for that family. That's a beautiful, pro-life, I don't know, it's a beautiful message that every life is valued in utero, and even if it's a very short life, right? So I love that the bishops have included this, because I think it's something we often forget. Okay, confirmation. Here we go. Those who care for persons with disabilities, shepherds of souls, especially pastors, are to see that the faithful who have been baptized receive the formation needed for the sacrament of confirmation and approach it at the appropriate time. All baptized Catholics who possess the use of reason, and that was your question, may receive it if they are suitably instructed, properly disposed, and able to renew baptismal promises. Persons who, because of intellectual or developmental disabilities, may never obtain the use of reason can still receive the sacrament and should be encouraged, either directly or if necessary through their parents, to receive it. You know the sacraments of initiation, right? Confirmation's in there. So how do we do that? How do we get to the highest level of reason? How do we get to the highest level of understanding? I'll give you an example. You all know Deacon Sunday Espinoza. So he's actually my spiritual director, so we talk a lot about stuff. He came to me at one point and said, Carol, I don't know what to do. I've had a family approach me and say, we want our child to make confirmation. We think he understands a little bit because when he's at church, he's very respectful, but he's nonverbal. We're not sure he's going to understand. And I said, well, and this is Carol's little, I will admit this is my soapbox. It is not completing pages 42 to 78. It is not answering 6 questions. It is about how that's, I'm sorry?
It's not service hours.
It's not service hours. Thank you. I didn't have that one in there, thank you. Yeah, what is confirmation?
For your baptismal identity is confirmed by an outpouring of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Whoa.
Yeah, good job. Sorry, Ruth?
Grace.
It's grace. Sacraments are grace. And just think how the Spirit can move. So anyway, so Sunday had this young man, and I think he was like 16. He was older. Not quite old enough to go to adult confirmation at the cathedral, but older. And, you know, it's like, we got a year. You're going to work on that, right? And so he started pulling out pictures and using music. The kid, nonverbal, loved all the Spirit songs. Rock along, hum along. And then we started talking about saints. So the kid has the auditory ability to listen. So we started talking about saints. And every week, Sunday would bring him 3 pictures of saints and talk about what each of those saints did. And he'd go like this, not that one. And the next week, he'd bring a few more, and they go like that, not those. To the point where this young man not only chose his own saint for confirmation, he chose St. Francis of Assisi, partly because he loved, I assume because he loved animals himself, and he saw this gentleman as loving animals. He also picked 2 other saints for his parents. He said, and his communication was, Mom, this is Mom, this is what Mom does. And it was St. Michael the Archangel. Think about that. Okay. Did he understand something was going on? Yes. At the level he had reason to understand? Absolutely. He made his confirmation. So it is a matter of looking at things not by chapter and verse and not by service hours, thank you. It is a matter of recognizing that where's the Spirit in this? Clearly this young man knew this was something special. He knew it had something to do with God. Who are we to say, well, I'm not sure you understand it's the Holy Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit and the fruits of the Spirit, right? Yeah, Tom?
Yeah, a lot of times we put it by age, the age of reason thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're over a certain age, you can't just get baptized, you gotta go through 2 years of prep,
Yes,
all this kind of stuff.
right.
Meanwhile, we'll baptize and confirm babies.
Right,
And
exactly.
so that's sort of what I use to say, heck, if we're doing it for someone who has no cognitive ability, you know, the grace is gonna give them what they need in a certain.
Right. Yeah, let's let the Spirit move. And that's true for confirmation, that's true for all the sacraments. Let the Spirit do this. It's, you know, we're only vessels in our ministry and how we are used. So let's be used and be open to the Spirit is working differently for this individual, whether they're adult or child, that this Spirit is using me in a different way than, say, the general 80% of the Catholic population. So, anyway, would you like?
Very good.
Is that good? Okay. Okay, Eucharist. We are to see that children who have reached the use of reason and correctly prepared and are nourished by the Eucharist as early as possible. I won't get into the argument of when, but nevertheless. The criterion for the reception of Holy Communion is the same for all of us. They are able to distinguish the body of Christ from ordinary food. Even if this recognition is evidenced through manner, gesture, or reverential silence, rather than verbally. Cases of doubt should be resolved in the favor of the Catholic to receive the sacrament. The existence of a disability alone is not a reason not to. Yeah, Tom?
Alzheimer's.
Oh, we actually address that. I'm going to move forward to right.
No.
Right here. They address that. Remember I talked about they're starting from conception to end of natural life? If someone has been a communicant, boy, it's a hard word, all their lives, presumption should be in favor of the person's ability to distinguish between Holy Communion and regular food. You should administer the sacrament.
The only time I ever stopped with one is that he kept spitting it out.
Okay, I learned something last week. Father John told me this. I did not know this. Do you know they make hosts that dissolve on the tongue? Emma? Oh, good. I need the name of the company. Seriously.
Oh, actually, just, dissolve a little bit in water too.
Put it in their mouth, right.
Yeah.
They spit it out.
Didn't really
Right.
get it.
And they may reach that point, and you certainly don't want to be disrespectful to the sacrament. So I would say that probably is a decision you need to make, But the reality is for Alzheimer's, they very specifically address people who have, and I think of my grandmother. She was 98 when she passed away. She had Alzheimer's. She wasn't the best person at church in terms of what we expect. But man, when she went up for communion, her whole demeanor changed. Her whole demeanor changed. She might have been futzing with her rosary and her handkerchief and all this stuff all through the homily and all through the Eucharistic prayer, but man, when it came time to go to communion, she changed. So reckon she knew it was different.
Ingrained in them.
Yes, yeah. And grace, Spirit uses that, so we should use it as well. I want to back up just a second. I want to talk a little bit about manner and gesture and reverential silence. A few years ago, we had a young man who was deaf, who had some autism as well, nonverbal. I mean, he signed a little bit, not much. And we had a 2-year class. Thank you, we had a 2-year class with our deaf children so they could get ready for First Communion. It was okay, because quite frankly, they hadn't had any catechetical formation. So it was okay. Anyway, Father Davidge, now he's of course Monsignor and retired, but Father Davidge at the time let me work with Sister Mary Joseph at St. Vincent's. We had this group of kids, and I'm not kidding, 6 to 16. It was a fun class. But everybody was learning. We kind of learned different things, but didn't really have any catechetical formation at all. And so, of course, you practice, right? So you practice. And little Nathan. Okay, we practice. Same thing. And Father Davidge asked me, he said, so are the kids ready for First Communion? I believe they are. And I trust that the Spirit has touched their lives and their hearts. But you need to know what Nathan's going to do. I needed to give him that heads up. This is Sunday Mass, right? And he said, you know what? We'll deal with it. He said, if you've done this formation, you've worked with the kids, we'll deal with it. Nathan came up to communion. And I'm standing there going, body of Christ, very simple. Nathan took that host and he consumed it. I still cry. I'm standing there, tears are running in my face because he knew. But boy, at the non-church, non-sacramental practice, he knew. You know, and I had to trust that God had used me as a catechist. Father Davidge had to trust the Spirit would move in this child. And yeah, so sometimes it's not chapter 4 and all that. It's about manner and gesture. And I didn't get that before the actual sacrament, guys. I got that at the sacrament, not before. It's amazing. The other thing I want to talk about is celiac disease for individuals, and I am one who cannot take the regular host. You know, they actually address it in the guidelines now, that we should find a way to make that work. I have often been asked, and it is included in the guidelines, that you can receive a small fragment of the regular host, you can receive the consecrated wine. I never receive the cup. And I'll tell you why. People still intinct. Despite my efforts as a Eucharistic minister to go like this, right? Without being too obvious. And as gross as it sounds, backwash. If I get the smallest fragment, I will be sick in 20 minutes for about 3 days. And I have had a priest say to me, oh, well, you just need to pray about that. I'm like, I think God made this body. It's a little bigger than he intended probably, but God made my digestive tract to work in the way that it works. And yeah, it was. I tried really hard not to be offended by that. But I would say find a way to do it. So at St. Thomas More, we have hosts in the back. I put them in a pyx that goes on the altar. I receive it. Nobody ever handles it. They just turn the pyx over, which is great. St. Vincent de Paul, I'm interpreting, so I just go up when the Eucharistic ministers go up and Father gives it to me then. Ditto at St. Mary's when I've been up there, Eucharistic ministers taking care of me and always brought me the pyx. Yeah.
We leave a little bit of wine in the chalice to bring down to the rail.
Not the chalice that had the fraction right?
The cup.
But not the one that had the fraction right.
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 Separate.
Not the main chalice.
Well, we have.
So if the fraction, I can't do, so daily Mass at St. Thomas More, we just use one cup, and it's the fraction right cup, and I couldn't begin to take
There are
it.
some people that are so sick they
That's me.
can't.
Yeah, I can't.
No, I'm talking about a young lady with autism.
Oh.
We give her the host and she receives
Oh,
it,
cool.
but we bring her a cup.
Oh, gotcha.
With the little,
A little bit, that works. Yeah, because the temptation for a lot of people, well, as a Eucharistic minister, I've seen a lot of people do that too.
Yeah, oftentimes she would spit it back.
Spit it back out and then you're ready and you're prepared. Yeah, and again, it's just having that conversation, talking about it. You know, I'll be honest with you, I've educated a lot of bishops over the years about how to do those. I don't know if any of you know Mike Driscoll, he's retired and he's now passed away out of Boise, but he was on the National Catholic Partnership Board, and we were at a meeting in DC one time. We were going over to the Basilica for Mass, and I said, here, Bishop, I know you're going to be a concelebrant, here's my pyx. And he kind of looked at me and I said, low gluten host, I can't have a regular host. And he kind of looked at me. And so we talked about it and he put it in his pocket and we hurried over and then he was too late to concelebrate. so then he's like sitting in the pew and he went, Carol, I'm so sorry. I'm like, it's okay, Father, or Bishop, you know. But really, it's not unusual, but celiac you can be up like to 7% of the population. So it can be a lot of people sitting in the pew who have that or struggle. When I first became celiac and I would be at a restaurant, they'd say, oh, you're on the Atkins diet. Well, no, I'm not on the Atkins diet. If I get that, I'm going to be sick in your bathroom in about 20 minutes. And I really don't want you to take your other customers to see that. You know, so it really is a matter. And Jeff, would you mind helping?
Or do you have that handout?
I do.
I was just gonna say, the commission did a very nice handout in English and Spanish
Okay.
on this, and it also lists
Here,
where you
here's
can
the English
purchase the host.
Some of each. If you
Some
want
of
to
the parishes will purchase the host for the individual, some of the individual parishes, the individual does it themselves.
Yeah, but let's help them find where the hosts are too.
Yeah, and that's all on here, it's
Yeah.
also on the website.
Yeah, and this is the old one because I still have
Oh, you
copies.
said the open.
But I'll be honest with you, there are like 4 companies, even Kavanaugh's, which everybody, a lot of people use, has low gluten hosts. Just don't buy the gluten-free ones, because by church teaching, the host must have wheat,
Yeah.
and gluten-free doesn't have wheat. So low gluten. I am partial to the sisters who are listed on this page because, and I'll tell you why, they were the first production of low gluten hosts in the country. The sister who figured it out finally, before she became a nun, has a PhD in biochemistry, which I think is just cool. Somebody would get all that schooling and then go become a nun. Anyway, so they do a nice job. It's Benedictine Sisters, Perpetual Adoration out of Missouri. I think, and that's who I have. So that's fine.
Usually we have so many visitors that someone will just come in and say, here's my host.
I do that.
I have no idea whether it's a valid
Yeah.
sacrament or what it's made of or anything, so it's up to God.
Yeah, it's up to God. I totally agree. But I will say I've been in Catholic bookstores that are Catholic stores that actually sell the no gluten ones, and I just always say, you can't give that to Catholics, right? Anyway, yeah. So anyway, these are the guidance that was created. Actually, Timothy Johnston and I did it
Yeah.
ages ago. That's a long time ago. So.
But I think more people are aware of it now, but there could be people out in your pews that don't know, and they don't go to communion, or they only take the cup if they can, so,
If they can.
which is fine, but
Yeah.
they ought to be aware that that's available.
And I went for a lot of years without receiving communion.
Yeah.
At all.
Oh.
Like 7 years without receiving communion. And I think I will tell you that was hard. I was still getting sick on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm a Saturday night kid. And I went to my doc and I just said, I just don't get it. I'm still getting sick. And he's LDS and he knows I'm Catholic. And he said, now your sacrament? And I went, oh. And I gave up going to communion and I got better. So, yeah. So it's out there. It's 1 in like 130 people. And when it's one person, chances are 25% of the family members will also have it. So it's pretty serious. And it's not just I'm not eating wheat thing either. It really is serious. So anyway, talked about the Alzheimer's piece.
Just before we leave that,
Sure.
is it better, we've always asked the people to bring their own because we don't want somebody to handle it accidentally. Is there preference or is there a...
So I like to go to communion. I like the grace, what can I say? So I'm prepared. I bring my host, I bring my own picks, I have my own picks.
Right.
St. Thomas More has picks available that can be used by other people. We keep our hosts, both maybe it's because St. Vincent's, I took what St. Thomas More did. We have a little Rubbermaid thing, and they're sealed inside, and they're in a little plastic Ziploc, and then they're inside, and they're in the freezer. And so we just tell people that's where they are. You can help yourself. Or I've certainly happened to have been in the vestibule or in the gathering space one time when somebody said, I said, oh, can I show you what we do here? And I just show them what we do. And then that actually then has the conversation about, be good at, now all of our ministers know it. There was a time at St. Thomas More only went to the priests because they knew it, but I think more and more people have been trained, and so I think it's helpful. So I would say I always come prepared. But some people come from parishes where it's always provided, and if they're traveling, they think you're going to provide it too.
Right.
And they don't have their own.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay, reconciliation. Here we go back to use of reason, right? Only those who have the use of reason are capable of committing mortal sin. And that's when you go to confession, right? To reconciliation. Nevertheless, even young persons, children or persons with disabilities, are often conscious of committing acts that are sinful to some degree, and they may experience a sense of sorrow or guilt. So as long as individuals are capable of having a sense of contrition for having committed sin, even if they can't describe it in words, it goes back to words in service hours in chapter 4, right? They can still receive the sacrament of absolution. Now, if they have profound disabilities, that maybe they cannot even experience that minimal contrition, they can be invited to participate in group penitential services and receive that. I would also say that the chances that they cannot have minimal contrition, the chances of them having committed a mortal sin are pretty slim. Okay, got that. If they are nonverbal, or have minimal abilities, then sorrow for the sin is accepted, even if repentance is expressed in a different way. You know, I'll give an example. Anyway, remember I said technology was important? Ever how someone communicates is how they should receive reconciliation. If you have someone that writes notes, or draws a sad face, or draws their sister and a sad face, maybe they pulled their hair, whatever, that's okay. If they use a tablet to communicate, that's okay too. The only thing you can't do is Skype. Can't Skype. But this does bring up something very specifically about the deaf. And Jeff, would you like to talk about this one a little bit?
Sure.
Come on, I put him on the spot, sorry.
So that's part of my role on the commission is deaf outreach. So I told you before, I have a daughter who is deaf. And as Carol mentioned, we have interpretive mass at St. Vincent's. Carol and my wife alternate there, interpreting. And also we have a deaf priest that comes to the diocese once a year to hear confession for the deaf community. And we usually have it just before Easter and before First Communion, because we also have religious education for deaf children. And we have a class that goes along with our regular religious education class, and we also have children with autism that attend that class because they use sign language as well. So that's something that's preferable, I think, for deaf people as Spanish people to receive reconciliation in their own language. So we offer that well. My daughter that you saw in the picture is now 26. She got married recently. Her husband has received the sacrament of baptism, but has never been confirmed. So we're helping him with confirmation. There's some excellent resources available from the National Catholic Office of the Deaf, and we'd be happy to share those with you and your parishes should you ever need them.
And we do have there are 11 priests in the country who are deaf. And they all are busy and have their own parishes and their own ministry. And when we say, don't you want to come to Utah? So it's always fun. But the commission supports someone coming once a year, which is very nice. One of the things, do you guys remember a picture, maybe I saw it on Facebook or something, of Pope Francis sitting in a confessional, leaning out the window to a woman in a wheelchair? I was like, why didn't you just stand up and go around and talk to her? You know, so sometimes our spaces aren't always the best, so making sure we have a space that is the best as well is always fun. But of course, it needs to be something private, somewhere private as well. Anointing of the sick. Just because someone has a disability does not mean they need the sacrament of the anointing of the sick. And I say that because there's this, I have been with people who've approached a priest just to kind of after Mass to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm new, and whatever. And Father immediately thinks they want the anointing of the sick, which I find a little odd, but that's okay. So it can be referred, again, we're going to go back to reason, has sufficient reason and can be strengthened by the sacrament. If they've lost the use of reason, but would have asked for that sacrament when they were in control of their faculties, if there is doubt as to whether they should have reason, we should confer the sacrament. That goes back not unlike to what we talked about with individuals with Alzheimer's and communion. If there's doubt, and I have to say that if I had to summarize into Carol's own little quote about the revised guidelines, when in doubt, confer the sacrament. It's in like 4 of the sacraments. They basically say that. If you're in doubt, confer the sacrament. Holy orders. This is Patrick Graybill, first deaf deacon ordained in the United States. This is Sean Carey, and you may recognize Cardinal Sean O'Malley. Sean Carey is deaf, and he